What you're looking at here today is a photo I had taken when back in Truro. I moved to Austria, as I mentioned before, in 2010. And about a year or two later I was back, and thankfully I had taken this photo just outside of Truro of Glooscap at what's known as the Millbrook Cultural Heritage Centre. This is a massive statue of Glooscap that stands next to the highway, and Highway 102 coming into Truro, or going out, whatever way you want to word that. Look at the size of this structure. Huge amounts of money, a lot of time and work went into building Glooscap, and here I am at the bottom, so I'm glad this picture was taken when it was, because you can see I'm off the left hand side. Look at the size of Glooscap's leg. Amazing, isn't it? Yes, Glooscap was a leader, and he loved nature, he loved the creation, he loved the universe, the stars, the galaxies, the constellations. But he worked with nature, and he set down rules and regulations for his people to live in peace and happiness. Very kind to children, and all kinds of great legendary tales have been told about him. So now we're going to return to the subject, but for now we're going to go to Google Maps, and you can see this red spot here. That's where the Glooscap is located, next to the highway. And here's Nova Scotia. We'll just take a bird's eye view here for a second. So there's Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, New Brunswick, and then Maine. So we're going to go back in, here's the Bay of Fundy out here, the Quapaquid Bay. Take it back a little bit further. And the Bay of Fundy goes down through here, in the Atlantic Ocean, Quapaquid Bay. But Truro's here, and the Mi'kmaq name for the Salmon River, for that area, was where the water ends. And it is a fact, I've done it myself, if you follow the Salmon River's gushing waters, eventually you'll come to the end of it, where it peters out to nothing, basically by water puddles. But you would never think it when you see the amount of water that passes through Truro. So we're going to take a street view here in a minute of Glooscap. So here we go. And there's the center right here. So when you're driving by, whichever way you're going, towards Halifax or back towards Truro, you'll see this monument of Glooscap. So now we're going to take a street view here. If we can zero in, there we go. Amazing, isn't it, what we can do with technology? I mean, I'm thousands of miles away from Nova Scotia, and yet I can go and revisit Nova Scotia whenever I want to by simple methods of what's referred to as Google Maps Street View. This is the land of the Mi'kmaq. Before 1492, this was all their land, and then after a while, the French and the English, Portuguese, and other peoples from other lands came in, and now we have it as it is. I'm not here to make an issue of everything today, but I want to show you this monument. If we can get back down here on the highway. Oop. I guess I went a little too far up on the other highway, so we'll just take it back up here for a second, just so we can get back down. That's what happens when you get playing around here. Here's Glooscap coming here now. You may wonder, why is he facing inward? Why not facing the highway? Well, there's a method and a reasoning behind that. There's a Macedon up towards Stuyak that does the same thing. It's looking out towards, or not out towards the highway, but inward. But he's on the other side here, but looking inland. The idea is to have you come in and visit and see, in this particular case, Glooscap face on, and that's what you do when you go in, and then you take your time and go into the center there and other activities. So you know what Glooscap's face looks like. We were looking at that a minute ago. I can zero in here a little bit. That's great, isn't it? Oop. And we'll just take it back just for a second, sorry. Yeah, it takes a little maneuvering here to get this going the way we want it to. Then you can zoom in, and that's not too bad of a view from this angle, is it? So that's Glooscap. Now, in my last video, I had mentioned that Glooscap and Martin lived on Cape Breton Island. Martin was Glooscap's younger brother. But the real story is, in the oral tradition, is that it was Glooscap and his twin brother Malsum that lived on Cape Breton Island. Now, we're going to go back to a long-range view here in Nova Scotia and give you an idea of how things are laid out. All kinds of tales and legends about what Glooscap did in Nova Scotia. But of course, the story is not just confined to Nova Scotia. Glooscap was all over these areas here, the legends and the people, the Algonquin, down through Maine, New England states, and other places. But I focus on Nova Scotia because that's basically where I'm from, and that's at the moment where my thinking is, because I grew up there and I know the place like the back of my hand, and I made a lot of discoveries between 1985 to 92 when I moved to British Columbia. Here's Cape Breton up here in the right side. So, just to clarify things, Glooscap and Malsum lived on Cape Breton Island. Now, Malsum was really not that great of a friend, and actually there's some Mi'kmaq people that are very adamant that Malsum wasn't even from Nova Scotia, the legend or anything. I have something here, I'll just read this here, if I can find it quickly. Malsum is, this is on the internet. You can go and find it and read it for yourself under Glooscap stories and other Mi'kmaq legends and myths. It mentions and it clearly states this point, and I think it's very valuable that we take this to heart. This name is sometimes given as belonging to an evil wolf who is claimed to be Glooscap's twin brother. However, this is probably not an original Mi'kmaq myth. The character does not appear in older Mi'kmaq texts. Malsum is not a Mi'kmaq word, Mi'kmaq. And the wolf is not a malevolent figure in Mi'kmaq folklore. Now, listen to this. It says, perhaps Malsum may have been a confusion of a wolf character from the Chippewa folklore, who was the cultural hero's brother, but not evil. In this particular case, they're saying it. So, there's quite a mix-up anyway. So, what I just read, they're basically saying there's confusion here, and I'm not going to try to sort it out. But I just wanted to clarify that point, that it wasn't Martin, but Martin was Glooscap's younger brother, who was with Glooscap a whole lot in Nova Scotia, and they did a lot of activity together. And another one of my videos, I'm going to get into the involvement of Martin with Glooscap and how he went to Newfoundland, and how there's a constellation story that's told in the Mi'kmaq oral tradition. It's almost identical to the Egyptian afterlife, and this has to do with the Milky Way, the constellations, but I'm not going to get into that today. But that's going to come up maybe next. And I'm not here to make any great links with the two groups of people. I'm just saying there's comparisons which are quite interesting. Now, what we're going to do, I have a video here I'm going to show you. Just a short clip, and I'll post this under my video later on so that you'll know where to go to find this story. This is just a little short part out of it, telling about Glooscap and Malsum. I like this story. It's one of the older ones, so I'm sure a lot of things have been made a lot clearer since this time. I'll mention the date of it when it was made and everything. But it's interesting. It just helps us to capture the feeling of Nova Scotia and what it must have been like before 1492, but also shows Malsum not to be a very nice character. Yeah, we'll give it a second or two here. Bring this up again. There we go.
The creation of the first Indian people, the Wabanaki. Glooscap, chief of good and of power, coming to earth to create. And Malsum, his twin, with the head of a wolf, banished from the heavens for his misdeeds and forced to serve his brother. They had been designated by the Great Spirit to instill in the first men the notion of what is good and what is evil, so that they might choose. The lie of the land was perfect for the task at hand. It was a restful place, the ideal place for creation. But Malsum had taken another direction. Glooscap would soon feel the impact of destiny. Malsum, his unwilling servant, blinded by ambition and jealousy, would inevitably sow dissension.
So that was a video about Glooscap and Malsum. I do have a legend here. It just reads like this, but in the end, Malsum kills Glooscap, but we're not going to get into those details. The legend goes, the oral tradition, the old Micmac, who lived near the St. John River, said that Glooscap was born as were the Indians in their old tales, and that he had a twin brother, or Malsum, or Malsumus, the wolf the younger. Beaver heard Glooscap whisper the secret of his life and told Malsum. He knew the secret. Beaver pressed close to Malsum and whispered, "Only a flowering rush can kill your brother." Then he demanded in a loud voice, "Now I want the wings of a pigeon." Malsum rolled with laughter. "You flat the wings of a pigeon. You flat tail." Beaver drew away angrily and slapped his big broad tail and went to Glooscap and told him what he had done. Took a fern root and struck Malsum. Glooscap and changed his body into the Shishok Mountains to rise blue and cold in the land of Gaspé. They said that's sheer shock. But anyway, that's just a legend. It's very confusing to follow. We can see there was no real love or friendship between Glooscap and Malsum. So I think that puts the rest of that with, for me, I just want to bring attention to what I was mentioning about Cape Breton with Malsum and Glooscap living there. And when I had mentioned that it was Martin. So anyway, that's clarified. When I lived in Nova Scotia, once again, I made many discoveries, and one particular area was Peggys Cove. In 1990, I found and discovered a big boulder there. But years later, a friend of mine discovered what is becoming as known as the Glooscap stone head, if that's a fair way of wording it. And I'm going to take you to that video now, and then we'll bring this video to a close. You can watch this on YouTube if you wish later. It's hard to know what went on in Peggys Cove, but for sure the Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia were well aware of Peggys Cove and the huge boulders and all that were there. So we're going to take a trip here to another video. Just take a few seconds. Just takes a bit to get this down, and we'll go to this one over here. I made this video several years ago.
I have a particular location today, but I'm not willing to reveal the location. But we have a boulder here that seems to have been perched up by two other boulders. And they seem to be in alignment here. Doesn't mean they really are. Just nature. And movement of waters over the centuries. Who knows how they got here. How they got here. But if you can imagine them standing up, straight in a row, it's very possible. But over here we have what appears to be a face, carved by the hand of man. Could this be Glooscap? Well, I'm just guessing at that. I heard someone mention that to me too, that's been here. And it's believed that this was carved. As you can see, the nose, the mouth area. We're going to go around on the side. This will be a short video to help you to see what's been discovered. Now, it's not just these rocks here. I've discovered over the ridge there various stone fences, you could call them, but I believe they're grave sites. Who knows? 1,000 years old, 2,500, who knows? Right now it's a mystery, but you can see this person that knows a lot thinks that this has been carved, and yet this all has to be tested and worked out in the coming years. But I thought it'd be worthwhile doing a short video on this and giving you an idea. I just don't want to aim anywhere that might reveal the location, because we don't want people picking away at these things. These are, if that were Glooscap, then it's quite a discovery. Is this a funeral site? I believe it is. And I found another, various other stone fences or walls, whatever you want to call them, and that tells me that something went on here along those lines. So I'll leave you with those thoughts for now, and we'll see what the future holds, but I think this needs to be kept as a secret at this moment.
You may have noticed there I mentioned this was a funeral site. It would be a cremation site of anything, but I was just grabbing at straws in around 2010 to try to figure out what went on here, because the person that discovered this stone head, gained the information from me where to go and look for things. In 1990, I know I walked around this boulder and many more of them right in this area. I didn't see anything here noticeable at the time because I wasn't looking up. I was looking down, trying to find, stone carvings, petroglyphs. But way over in the distance, you can see boulder shape, but way over beyond them, I found a giant boulder with a stone fence that went around it. And just to shorten this story, there was a hole at the bottom, like a little doorway, an entranceway, and I crawled in it. And if it hadn't been full of mud, I don't know how well I could have gotten up, but I was able to sit in it with my knees up, and there was a hollow above my head. And if that soil hadn't been there, I don't know if I could have stood up or not, possibly. Now, I don't know what that boulder was for. It might have been a root cellar concept of keeping vegetables and things for the winter, or fish, dried fish maybe from the ocean. The ocean's just down here, not far. The Peggys Cove Lighthouse down that area. The features on here, you can see the nose. I mean, right here, I have no problem. I mean, some people say, oh, it's just a boulder. Yeah. And then we have an eye here, and on the other side, there's an eye too as well, and the nose, you can make it out. And then a mouth feature here. We're not going to get into speculating on it being carved all up, because the native people had a belief not to injure what they referred to as Mother Nature. So in many cases, they would scratch the surface off the stone to make a petroglyph and or stone carving. Now, this might have been a bit of work done on it. I don't want to get into saying anything. I'll leave this up to the person that discovered it. I was just amazed when he brought my attention to this, and we finally went up. And when I had a look at it, I couldn't believe my eyes. And there it was, the face. I have no problem at all. And no one's ever talked about this, but it's almost like it has a peaked cap on it, peaked cap. And this was a notable thing with the Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia. So he's determined. I mean, he's not saying everything's fact, but it reminds him of the cultural hero of the Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia, the chief Glooscap. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of reasons that led him to feel that way and view it that way. So now we're going to go back to Google Maps, and I'll just give you an idea where this is located, a general picture. You know, there's the news is out. I mean, this has been well documented on what's known as the Curse of Oak Island. It's a TV documentary or show that's been on the airwaves for a few years now, and they went in there and documented this stone head with the person that found it. And here's Peggys Cove down this area, and we'll just go in. Oak Island is over here. I always, in my videos, I like to draw some attention to Oak Island because it's been of high interest to me and thousands and thousands of other people. It's a mystery that's been unsolved for more than 200 years. A treasure hunt has taken place, and the mystery is still not solved. Now we're going to go over to Peggys Cove. I mean, I had a theory one time. Maybe the people that were the ancient people, as I refer to them, there's a lot that went on in here. Inland might have had something to do with Oak Island, Nova Scotia. Once again, I'm not going to be able to get into every theory and every thought and every thing that we can imagine and speculate in and conjectures here today. But once again, I will deal with these subjects one at a time. So here's the Peggys Cove area, and the lighthouse right down here. And I could go a lot faster if I wanted to, but I prefer to take my time and show you some details. Here's a parking lot area, and up here is what got me interested in Peggys Cove in the first place, this white spot, and this is where a jet had crashed. I thought, back in the late 80s, all we had is aerial photographs of Nova Scotia. So I went in there to try to find out what happened, and later on I found out that a plane had crashed there. In this video, I'm not going to point out where the stone heads are located, but in this general area, and but at another time I'll get more detailed on it. And I'll close it for now, and we'll pick up on this subject again at a later date.